All right, good morning everyone, and thanks for joining our Let's Speak BO webinar series. We're going to go ahead and get started. So for those of you who have joined us before, welcome again. We'd like to keep this hour session as interactive as possible, so if you have any questions, please feel free to enter them into the questions panel and we'll address them to our speaker as we go. And also, please stay tuned to our events website at events.infosol.com because we'll post our upcoming lineup for summertime for our Let's Speak BO, and we also have some announcements that we'll be discussing towards the end of the session today. So with that being said, I'd like to hand it over to our presenter, Doug Evans, who will be talking about sensitive data protection with data services data masking transform. Welcome, Doug.
Thank you, Brianna. All right, so let me show my screen here. Okay. All right. So yes, what we're going to do is we're going to delve into a transform. It's called data masking, and this is a relatively newer transform that is in data services. It was actually delivered as part of Data Services 4.2 Service Pack 3. And since then, they've actually done some newer, updated features within data masking as well, which we'll touch upon. But yeah, so kind of want to dig into it here at the beginning by just kind of explaining, what data masking is going to be useful for. Okay, and what we're looking at is to have the ability to protect some sensitive data. Okay, and it's not this is not replacing what we use. Data services also has functions for encryption and decryption and so on. This is not for that. Okay, that's great to have for your production data and so on, but this is more used for being able to do software testing and user training where you've got other users, developers, let's say, that are going to be seeing your data, okay? And you do not want them to see that sensitive data such as credit card numbers, maybe a personnel number, social security numbers. There's a whole list of things that could be considered sensitive data. So we're going to be using data masking to actually mask that particular data, but still be able to present it. And that's the key thing: be able to present it to a developer in a way that, okay, it's still usable. Okay, with encryption, you're seeing a bunch of weird characters that replace maybe a person's name, but with data masking, you don't necessarily are not necessarily seeing the weird characters. It's still going to look like a name, or it's going to have a date. Maybe it's a birthday. So that information will still be relevant out there, and that's kind of a key importance here. Taking, say, for instance, like a sensitive date, like a birth date. Yeah, maybe you want to mix up the month and the day information, but maintain the year, because in some type of development, they're looking at the year for demographic purposes, for instance. So they need to have the exact year, but change the month and day maybe. So that's kind of what we're looking at with data masking, okay? And this is all built within your existing ETL logic, okay? It says one data movement. So when you create these jobs, data services jobs, this transform is built within a particular data service job. So it also provides some randomizing your sensitive data, for instance. Okay, so say for instance you have salary fields and so on, and you don't want to really show the exact salary of an employee, but what this will do is kind of do some randomizing for you and come up with a different salary amount, but it's using this randomizing feature. Okay. Another key thing, which I don't show on here on this screen, is it will also preserve For instance, if you're going to randomize or you're going to mask, let's say, a personnel number, okay, and that personnel number is a key in a table, okay, so you're gonna mask that. Well, you want to be able to preserve. So for personnel number 10, if you do the data masking process, it may come up with a number like 900. Well, you want to maintain that because that's part of a key. So the next time you run the job, you don't want personnel 10 to be changed to 800. You want to maintain the fact that it's still 900. So they have, within data services, which we're going to get into as well here in just a few minutes, we have what we call a seed that can be, you create per the rules that you're developing. So you use that same seed, and every time you run the job, because it's using that same seed, it's going to take personnel number 10 and make it always 300 or 400, whatever it is. It's going to stay the same, which is very important when you're dealing with the keys in tables. So yeah, let's take a look. It supports any data types: numeric, string, dates, and so on. And you can see at the bottom of the screen, it's part of the platform in the object library of transforms. It's under the platform, and you'll see it down there. It's called base data mask, okay, and that's the name of the transform that we're going to be taking a look at. So a good example that we're talking about is, say, the salary information, okay? So when you send your employee database to developers and testers in your company, you know, who do not have proper security clearance to view such information, we need to mask that information, but we need to present it in a realistic way so the developer can go ahead and test their application that they're building. So one of the things with data masking transform, because when you're creating data services jobs, there could be a lot of different transforms or different objects that are up front in that job in the data flow itself. You want to make sure that the data masking piece is put towards the end of that data flow, so that ensures that all the processing of your data is being done prior to actually running your data mask process. Now, the thing here, what I'm saying is, because this is not using encryption or decryption, the function and so on, there is a caution, okay? The changes that you make are irreversible, okay? So that's why you want to ensure that you're keeping, you're preserving your original database, your original tables, okay? All you're doing here is maybe setting up some template tables in data services that are going to be used as test source for the developers, so they can use those as source tables, these little template tables, as they develop their application. So how it works? Okay, so you're gonna the base data masking transform provides some techniques, okay, protection techniques, and there's really three main ones, okay, and these came out with the original release of the data masking transform. So you have the ability of doing what we call masking out. We have the ability to do variances by a fixed number, a percentage, or a range, and then we have date variance, okay, and below you can see a very simplified data flow that I built that is bringing in maybe a human resource table, okay, and then it runs it through the data masking process, and what you have to do is open up that data masking transform and provide the inputs and the outputs and the type of processing that you want to do as far as the data masking piece goes, and then you're pushing it out, in this case, to a template table. So let's take a look at each of these techniques. So for the mask out, this is where you have the ability to mask out the data with a masked out value, okay? It supports any data types and it maintains your formatting. So in this case that I'm showing here, we have this table. This is an employee table, and we can see here that we do have an email, Okay, we have an email here. So that could be could be sensitive data that you don't want to know, you don't want your developers to know everybody's email, for instance. So what you can do is within the data masking transform, there's a setup, okay, that allows you to say, well, I'm going to do some masking. I'm going to mask out, in this case, the email. And what we're saying here is I want to start at the end position. So I'm going to come clear over to, in this case, the M in .com, and I'm going to mask out from a certain position from that M. So in this case, I'm saying the unmasked length is 4. So what that means, I'm going to start with the M. I'm going to go over 4 positions. Now, the nice thing here is we're going to maintain formatting. That's another option down here. Okay, so with emails, of course, there's usually a specific format. It's going to have an @ sign in this case, like bsmith @ and it's also usually has a dot before the com. Okay, so what it automatically will do is say, well, okay, 4 positions. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, and so starting really at the F in this case, I'm going to mask over from that all the way to the beginning and put X's in the email, okay? Because I really don't want anybody to know that particular email address. So in this case, the results, after you run this process through, you can see that we have all X's, @ sign, all X's, but it maintained the F and the .com, okay? So that is one particular way of using the mask out technique within data masking. So another technique is what we call numeric variance. Okay, so this is the ability to mask numeric data, and this would be like your salary, maybe employee or employer contributions, and so on. And this supports all your numeric fields: integers, decimals, percentages. Okay. And what you're going to end up doing is providing some type of a variance, okay? And this could be a percentage, a plus or minus percentage. It could be a fixed value, okay? And it can be a range of values. And in this, this particular technique also recognizes several types of indicators, number indicators. It knows all about commas and periods and spaces. Decimals, it takes care of that. The sign, if it's a plus or a negative field. It also handles the US dollar sign as well as the euro symbol. So let's take a look at how the numeric variance would work. So in this case, we're taking a salary. Okay, we're looking at the salary now. We're done with the email, but we're looking at the salary. So here we're coming in with $28,000, $56,000. We don't want to see that person's salary. So we're going to come into the data masking, and another group in there of techniques is called the number variance. So we're going to select the salary field to be processed through this number variance. And then in this first case, I said the type of variance is a fixed number, okay? And I'm going to give it a minimum value of 20,000 to 60,000. Okay, so it's never going to, the results here are never going to be below 20,000 or greater than 60,000. And the variance is going to be $500. Okay, so what this variance does is actually on the incoming number, in this case 28,000, it's going to say basically that I cannot go below 27,500 or above 28,500. Okay, so that's going to be my variance as my results here, and it's never going to be lower than the 20 and higher than the 60. So in this case, the results of this came out. This first one was 28,000, came out to be 27,813, and you can see the differences here. But it actually came out with some type of a salary. That is something that can be worked with, okay? It's not encrypted or anything. It's a numeric value. Another way of masking is using the percentage variance, okay? So in this case, we have the salary with a percentage, and all I'm saying is go 25% up or down, okay, and give me the results of that. So the results here came out a little different than up here, but it's based on not going more than 25% up or down of the value coming in. Okay, again, very usable salary information for the developer. And the final one is a type of variance we use in a range, where I'm saying, okay, I'm going to say the results have to be between 100,000 and 500,000. And so it'll come up with a random number between 100,000 and 500,000 and show that as your results. Okay? So that's numeric variance.
Hey Doug, a quick question on that. Just going
Yeah.
back to that last slide. I noticed on the first two examples where you used a fixed number and a percentage that you know, it was very, very close to the original.
Mm-hmm.
If I didn't want it to be close to the original, I could still use fixed number and percentage. I just have to have a different variance.
That is correct.
So
that is correct.
How would that work? If I had made the variance 5,000 instead of 500, I would see those final salary numbers significantly different.
Yeah, you would probably again, it's producing this inside. So yeah, you would probably I played around and tested that out, and you would see probably maybe it might come out like in this case to like maybe 29,100 or something like that, but it's going to give it a little more range to work with, right? Than what it's doing here. But yes, if you give it a range, the minimum and maximum value, it seems to work closer to a wider variety of numbers. So in that case, yes, you would see, and again, it's all variable. I mean, you don't know exactly how that would work out, but I would, in your case, if you're saying something like you want a wider range, you would maybe do the salary range area and just give it say 50,000 to 100,000, and it's going to produce, as you see here. Look at the difference, right? I mean, if I would have put in 50,000 here, or 20 or 10,000, I mean, you would still have this wide range. You might have some that are 40,000, some that are 100,000, and so on. Does that answer your question, Paul?
Well, yeah, I could see it on the range. I just wanted to see how much flexibility I had on the other two, the fixed number and the percentage. I think you answered it. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. So the date variance. Okay, this is now the ability to mask date data. So this would be birth dates, hire dates, whatever that you need to mask. This supports the data types of date time, and varchar fields, okay, for dates. The variance types are you can say, okay, within a certain range, fixed days, fixed months, fixed years, and you can also give it a range in this as well. So this recognizes varying date formats. So you can have the month, DD, YY, and the 4-digit, the century and the year, month, day, and there's quite a wide variety of dates that this will recognize. And it also recognizes the abbreviated and fully spelled out months. Okay, so if we take a look at this, I have up here in the incoming, I have the birth date. Okay, so this is in the the century and the year format with the dots. And what I can do with that is come down again in that in the options within the masking, and I have what we call the date variance. And I can take the birth date and say, okay, in this case, I want to take and use fixed months, okay, in this case, and I'll have a variance of 6. So this kind of shows you, Paul, even if you expand and so on, sometimes if you look at the results here, even though I said 6 months, we're only going back a month, okay, hardly, about a month on this one. The results of this one is, just about 2 months. And here it just threw out, within 8 days. Okay, it kept the year and the month, but just reduced the days by 8. So again, totally, it's a variety of dates that it will come up with, and you just don't know. That would be for the fixed months. The fixed days, we're showing a variance of 7 days. So the results here are not going to be any more than 7 days less or greater than the date that you have on there. So you can see the results here based on that. And then you also have the fixed years. Okay, and what I did here is I said, okay, we got 10 years, but I want maybe you want a minimum and maximum date. Okay, so I said, yep, make it 10 years, but the minimum is going to be the year 2000, March 24th, and the maximum is 2008, March 24th. Okay, so you see the results here all came in with the birth dates, in the year 2000. Because I set the minimum at 2000. Okay, so here's your results for that. So that's using the date variance. Okay, so now what I was telling you, I think up front, was the ability to have what we call a seed value. Okay, and in this case, because I was dealing maybe with the human resource table, I could set up what we call a human resource mask. And basically what that means is any of the settings that I put into that data masking, which could be in the mask out, the number variance and so on, that maintains that, okay? So that way, especially when you're using, like I was telling you earlier, using a key, for instance, maybe a personnel number that you want to, it's part of the key, and you want to maintain the results of that transform, the data masking transform, the results of that should be the same every time you run that job, because you don't want to change the key. You would then set up this, all you have to do is just put in a name in the seed option, and then every time you run that job, it knows it's using that particular seed, and the results are going to always be the same when it comes to the, in this case, a key information. Okay, so this is really a crucial piece here. Now one of the things I mentioned to you is, as this was developed back in under Service Pack 3, Service Pack 5 came out, and they added what they call a pattern variance, the ability to mask pattern data. Okay. And this is really kind of nice, because what it'll allow you to do, and I got several examples here showing this. So in this case, say we had this input A12DER, and what we can do is say, starting at position 2 for a length of 2, I want to preserve that information, but I want to randomize everything else. Okay, so the result could come out like this, R12KRQ. Okay, so this is kind of nice when you're, maybe it's talking about emails or whatever. Maybe you only, or even say for instance, it's a credit card. Okay, and we already know, I think the first 6 positions have to deal with the institution, the banking institution, maybe a country or something like that. And we want to maintain the first 6 positions. We can do that and randomize the rest of that credit card number. Okay, so that would be a way of using pattern masking. So in this case down here is another way where we can say, okay, we got incoming as 1, 2, 3 in A, and then what we're doing here is at position 2 for a length of 2, so these middle 2 positions, we're going to use a different type of variance. We're going to call it a character value, where we can specify, randomly what can go into these middle 2 positions. So it can be anything like JK, L, a B, and W through Y, or even a number, a 2. Okay, so the results of this could come out in this case. Everything, this first and the last column will always be randomized, and the middle 2 will be based on what you tell it to be put into this character value. So in this case, it picked out of here, okay, I'll put a K and a B in there for you. Okay, so this is another, so we have, you know, where we preserve everything, and then we also have what we call character value. And here's another way. So if we have this input here, 54WTMLK, and what we can do is set up multiple definitions on this input. Okay, so what we're saying here is the first definition in position 1 for a length of 2, we're going to preserve that. Okay, and we're not providing any value. Okay, so we're just preserving the 5 and the 4. That's we want that in the output of this. And then in position, the second definition of this, we would say position 3 to the end. So basically this, we want to have a string variance, and we can provide an actual value. So in this case, we'll put in the word milk. And so the end result is because we preserved the 5 and the 4, and we just basically randomized. It's not a random thing. We actually provided the string to replace whatever is in here with the word milk. Okay? So that's what pattern variance does for you. It's very, very powerful. So let's take a look. I'm going to show you, and this will help kind of walk through a little bit of what this is all about. So I'm going to bring up, I have a data services up here and running. Okay, so you can see on my screen here, within the data services designer, I have several jobs that I've set up to just kind of demonstrate a few things that are going on. And I didn't want to put everything all into one job because I kind of like to break this up a little bit. So I created this job down here. It's called New Job 4. Okay, and if we take a look at the data flow here, we can see that we're using the employee table, which has, in this case, a personnel number. Okay, and this personnel number is the key to this table. So what I want to do is run this through a data masking process, okay, where I take the personnel number. This is the incoming from the source. I move the personnel number down into the input area. There's an input tab. You got an input, an options, and an output. Okay, this is the 3 areas when you define what you're going to do with the data masking. Okay, so in this case, all I'm dealing with is the personnel number. So I would take the personnel number and move it down into this, what they call the numeric data. So this is going to feed the data masking transforms numeric. One of its open areas is numeric, called numeric data. Okay, so from there, you know, and what I'm also going to do here in just a second is build my output. Okay, but what I do from here is once I give it the personnel number, I can come into the options. Okay, let's expand on this a little bit. So what I wanted to do is, because this is a key to the table, so whenever I change the personnel number, I want it to be that way every time I run this job. So I just basically gave it a name. I called it personnel seed. Okay, so that's going to be the name of this this setup for the masking. And then what I did is I came down into the number variance part of the masking setup. Okay, and I told it to grab. If you just click on this, you can see it, one of the only available field in this case is the personnel number. Okay, so I told it to take the personnel number, and I gave it a range, type of variance, and here's all your options as we kind of talked about. We have fixed number, percentage, and range. So I taken it as a range, and I said, okay, on the output, make that personnel number a 0 to 50,000. Whatever you want to pick, that's what we're going to have. Okay? So once you set that up, very simply, you know, this is all you had to do. Once you set it up, then you go to the output, and it says, okay, well, what do you want in your output over here out of the masking tool? So what I did is I went ahead and selected the 4 4 columns of data that we're not doing anything with, but I wanted to bring them over. And then by selecting this down here, checking this box, I'm saying, give me the personnel number that the data masking tool is given to me, and it pops it up here. And I'm making that the key, of course. Okay, that's got to be my key. So when you run this, okay, when you run this, the results would be something like this. I've already run this job, and you can see over here the personnel number has all changed. Okay, so it recognized, or it basically said that the personnel number 0 is now going to be 933. 1 will be 1221, and so on. Okay, so it changed the personnel number for you. Okay, well, that's all said and good. Now I want to prove to you the fact that by setting that seed, every time we run that job, or a job that's using the employee or any personnel number, right, in the system, so that it'll keep that 933 and so on as the personnel number as output. So I created a new job, and again, I brought in the employee table, basically set up the same data flow, except I'm going to a different table. But in this data flow, of course, I made sure that I'm saying, hey, we're going to use the personnel seed. So when I process this, when I run this job, I want to see the same personnel numbers. And there they are. So the results of that came out with the same personnel numbers. Now we have integrity, you know, between these tables, using that as the key. Okay? So it's very powerful, very, you know, you need that. We need to have that ability. So let's take a look at another data flow that I built. Okay, again, we're using the human resource table, which I'll show you down here. Okay, so in this case, we have first name, last name, social security number, salary, and email. So in this data mask, what I did was I went ahead and said, well, I want to process the first name, last name. I'm going to do some masking on these 4 fields. Okay, so what you do is you drag, in this case, salary would come down. It's a numeric data, so you drag that into here. Email would be dragged. They actually have one to mask emails. Okay, so I would drag the email into there. And then first and last name are just basically general character data. Okay, so I would drag those in. Let me create this over here. And then my options now are going to be a little different. Okay, so now you see I'm not using any seeds. Okay, in this case I didn't want to mess around creating a seed. But what I did down here is in the mask out, I said, okay, we're going to select the email. And again, like in my, I think in the PowerPoint, I said start at position 4 at the end and use formatting and just place X's into everything from position 4 at the end all the way to the beginning of the email. So that would be the first thing I would do. Now, if you want to add more, because initially when you bring up the masking properties, you only have one area to put in a mask, okay? But if you want to create more, you just right-click and do a duplicate option, and it opens up another mask ability, masking out series here. So with this one, I created, I'm using the first name, okay? And what I did here is I said, okay, with the first name, I want to start at the end and basically mask everything out and create lowercase z's, for instance, okay? Now you may do something different where you try to keep the part of the first name or part of the last name. That can also be done, okay? And then I did a third one for the last name. And again, in this case, I did lowercase x's for the whole, to mask out the whole name. And then I went down and I created a number variance, okay, for the salary. And in this case, I'm doing a fixed number, okay, and then I'm saying the minimum and the maximum is 20 to 60,000, and I'm using a $500 variance. So that would be the setup. And then what I did is those 4 that I just defined, I would check here, and those would automatically populate in the output schema. And then I also brought over the original last, first name, and salary, just so we could see the differences. So when you run that job, the differences here, I can open up the what it was before, and here it is after. Okay. So very, very nice, and it's a very simple setup. Okay. So finally, what I wanted to show you is here's one that is doing quite a few things. Okay, so I'm taking the employee table here and I'm running it through this masking option here. And you can see here where I'm taking, in this case, I'm using also the dates. Okay, we're going to set up some date variance, which we hadn't done yet and showed you. And then I'm also doing the employee ID, the supervisor ID, home phone. You know, you can do phone numbers as well, and it'll maintain that format for the phone numbers. Here's Social Security. Here's last name and first name again. Okay, so if I come into my options, slide this over. Okay, so if I come into my options, you can see what I'm doing here with the masking out. Okay, in this case, I'm starting at the end and I'm masking out. I'm using 9s in my employee ID. The same for the supervisor ID, all 9s. And again, I did the same thing for first and last name. Okay, and then the phone number. You know, you can play around. You can do different characters or different ways of masking out on the phone numbers, the extensions. So you can have quite a setup here of, you know, masking out different fields in your input source table. Okay, and then down here is what I wanted to show you, which we hadn't done yet. Here's our date variance. So in this case, I'm taking the birth date and saying fixed years, variance of 20 years. And the same with the hire date, making it a variance of 20 years and having it, you know, basically using the fixed years option of that variance. So once we do that, again, I would select everything and put that into the output. And then your results would look like this. So here's our input, and here's our output. Okay, so if we slide over a little ways, you can see where all the masking took place. And here's our birth date compared to what we had here. The first person, we had birth date 1972, December 8th. It changed it to 1956, February 27th. But it's all in the same format. And you can see the phone numbers here. Okay, look what it did. It even maintained the area code within the parentheses, but I just masked it out with all 9s. Okay, and all the way across. Okay, so that basically takes you through understanding the data masking transform, what you can do with it, how it maintains integrity between tables and so on if you're using, if you're masking out keys, and the different abilities. Now, this VM right now, I got to get it up to Service Pack 6, but at least I wanted to show you in the PowerPoint where you can do the pattern, which is more of the newer release of data masking. But that's also a very powerful piece that would be very useful in many organizations. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Doug. That was pretty interesting stuff. Have you come across some clients who've actually used the masking, and what kinds of things have they asked to use it, or are they using it for?
You know, Paul, I haven't come across any clients that are using this yet. I would like to get a some type of a survey out to see who is actually using it. I know a couple of our InfoSol data services experts that are going out on sites. I could probably query them and see, you know, if this is used heavily. But based on what I'm reading out there on the, you know, going out on SAP sites and so on, you know, I can see where it's being used a lot, because you have to figure with security being such a key importance today, right? Where you know, I think a lot of companies are hiring companies to come in and work on in the data services area and work with their data. You know, you have to sign, you know, disclosure documents and so on, but it's very important for them now to really, you know, give them data that is not representing, you know, the actual data, but still giving them the same format of data that is used, you know, that they can use to help, you know, build these particular jobs. So I would have to say it's probably getting used more and more in today's world, but again, to get an exact number, I'd have to probably query, you know, are some of our experts that get out in the field.
Well, I think you made some valid points at the beginning, you know, in terms of the fact that this is not encryption, and of course encryption is one possibility, but obviously once you encrypt the data, you can't manipulate it in the same way and do your validation and testing, and so therefore for people who are, you know, testing and validating you know, their ETL scripts, their loads, and so forth. But you don't want those people to have access to people's social security numbers, to salaries, to credit card information, and so forth. I think it does, you know, it obviously makes a lot of sense. The one thing that I thought was intriguing, though, as you pointed out, that once you mask, it's irreversible.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
That is correct. Yep. So
right.
You know, so when you're developing this, right, you're gonna, it probably take some time up front, right, to develop. You know, you're going to have your in-house experts, you know, that understand your data, develop the necessary kind of template tables that will be used by your outsourcing people that are coming in to work on this. So and yes, that is irreversible. You can't take a masked and they don't have like an unmask tool. You know, it's quite interesting though, as you say that, if they can, you know, develop the seed, right, that allows you to always mask the data the same way, right, as far as numeric data content. You know, a reverse, I would think, should be something down the road that I would see coming.
Yeah, I think that could, you know, that could be interesting. I mean, as you were talking, you know, it occurred to me, yes, of course, a lot of people offshore development, a lot of people bring in contract staff and so forth. They don't want them necessarily to see this information, but also their own employees to some degree as well. And I think, you know, as more and more people start to look at putting, you know, their applications and their data in the cloud, that also becomes, you know, another, you know, security breach point that they would want to perhaps use for something like masking. Arif from UCLA had a question. Is there a way to replace names from a list of dummy names?
To replace names from a list of dummy names. So you're using, I guess I need to understand that a little better. So is this list coming in, are you using that as a source? Is there a table of dummy names, or?
Yeah, so say you had a list of dummy names, like you had, like, you know, Joe Black and Fred Blue and whatever, you know. So is there a way then to you know, replace?
I see what you're saying. Yeah. Take and replace and use these set of names in replace of actual names. Yeah, okay. I'm trying to think here. What you could probably do is set up, and within data services you can set up these variables, okay, which could be a you know, a set of variables, a list or whatever, and based on the replacement, you know, if we go back into data masking, where you're saying, you know, replace with this or this or this, you could actually have a variable, right? You can use variables in replace of that. So it would go out and randomly pick from a list of, you know, these variables and replace your actual names with that. That's the way I would think that that could be done. I have not done that myself, but I'm sure that's something that could be handled.
Yeah, Arif, if you could clarify that's what you were looking for, or if you could give a little more context to the question, that would help, because I'm wondering if Arif is also thinking what we were just talking about in terms of, you know, okay, if I mask data and I now want to actually start to use that data with correct names in it, right, can I go back? Because I can't unmask it, but maybe I can go back and modify it.
Okay, that's a very good question.
And put the real names in there.
Right. That's a very good question, and that's something that definitely I've not played around with that, but I could definitely take. I'm sure there's a way we can handle that, either through a list of a list of variables that we use as the input into the masking process. That type of thing is what I envision right now. But that's something that we could definitely take a look at and provide some information back to, you said UCLA, definitely.
Okay, yeah, no, Arif said we did answer the question.
Okay.
That he's gonna check on that use of variables that you mentioned.
Okay, great.
So I think we got it there. But I can see, you know, again, you might be doing something where you would use masking heavily in development, but then when you get to QA, you actually want it to be a bit more real.
Exactly, yes. Yep. You don't want XXX and YYY. I can understand that. Yep.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, so yeah, and as I said, I think the seeding is quite powerful. Now, did you say that the seeding was there in the earlier releases of data services, or that only came with Service Pack 5?
No, seeding has always been there.
Okay.
Yep, back with Service Pack 3 when this came out. Yep.
Right. So what was the added feature that came with Service Pack 5?
The pattern variance. Yeah, where you can actually take within a particular incoming field data and actually say within this, I'm going to keep the first two positions, or maybe I just want to mask the position 3 through 5, and you can provide what you want to mask it with. It could be a certain set of variable characters, or it can be an actual string that you want to provide to it, that type of thing. And that's another option too. Now that I think about it, is the pattern variance could be something that we could actually then feed actual names, test names that you want to use. Instead of, you could say, hey, take this incoming name, and then, from the beginning to the end, I want it to replace with one of these strings that I've got set up, which could be Doug Evans or whoever, right? So that's another option, I think, to, using a set of names that, dummy names that you want to use.
Okay. Good. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Doug. That was extremely informative. I'd like to point out that Doug Evans will actually be presenting a data services training class as one of the post-IBIS conference offerings. So IBIS taking place the week of June 20th, and Brianna's going to talk a little bit about it in a second. But on the Thursday and Friday after IBIS is a 2-day data services class, which would be very good for anyone who really wants those holes filled in terms of what there is available in the data services data integrated tool set. And it is possible to attend that without attending the main conference, but there are data services sessions in the main conference as well. So if you're interested, please reach out to us after this call. We've got some fabulous deals for that training class. The class can also be taken, well, no, it's an on-site class in California, sorry. It's an on-site class in California. Okay, all right. So thanks again, Doug. Great session, and we'll hand back to Brianna.
All right. Well, thanks, Paul, and thanks, Doug. Just some upcoming events. Paul mentioned IBIS, so definitely tune into our attendibis.com website if you're interested in taking a look at our main conference sessions. It's definitely not too late to attend, so check out our latest specials, and then definitely reach out to any of the InfoSol team if you're considering attending in Carlsbad. Also, some upcoming events. We are also participating in tandem webcast series for the ASUG webcast occurring. Our next one is this week on June 2nd. For web intelligence users, it's going to be focused on queries and data providers. But this is also a look at upcoming sessions on the ASUG webcast series website, which you can find all of that information at asug.com/events. And then definitely stay tuned to our Let's Speak BO webinars. We're going to be listing out all of our summer sessions and into 2016 to finish off the year. So then, thanks again, Doug, for a great presentation. This will conclude our webinar for today.